Alright, we've reached the end. It's time to review the final episode from the second season of The Witcher show on Netflix. If you've watched any of my previous reviews, you should already know that this video will be full of spoilers, but if not, be warned. And also, go check the others, there's a full playlist in the description. Okay, so we open up with Ciri being possessed and dreaming of Ermion back at Cintra.
What the fuck's going on?
But she's actually already at Kaer Morhen. She gasps, and we cut to Yennefer chasing after Geralt, who is also arriving at Kaer Morhen. I hate to bring up geography again after the last episode, but they appear to have gone from Cintra to Kaer Morhen overnight essentially. These two locations are literally on the opposite ends of the map. This is the official map, by the way, provided by Netflix themselves. In fact, on the screenshot I've been using in my previous reviews, you can't even see Kaer Morhen, that's how far away it is. Yet, based on Yennefer's behavior, it seems as though they had just left Cintra a moment ago and she's running after him to apologize. Anyway, possessed Ciri kills a few witchers in their sleep. Sadly, the medallions do not seem to be registering the demonic presence. And also, we learned that witchers can hear a person's heartbeat, so you'd think it won't be that easy to sneak up on them, but perhaps sleep dulls their senses. Luckily, Geralt shows up in time to save Vesemir.
Ciri, what's going on?
Did Yarpen and company simply drop Ciri at Kaer Morhen while the witchers were asleep? It seems that way. Based on Vesemir's reactions, I can't really tell if he even knows that Ciri was here to begin with. What I can tell, however, is that these potions taste really good. We see this in the show several times, where witchers take potions and they don't really experience any discomfort. It's quite different from the game trailers, for example, where Geralt is shown convulsing and bleeding and whatnot, and I suppose it makes sense, given that these potions alter your eyes, your muscles, that it won't be a very pleasant experience. But anyway, Vesemir insists that Ciri must be killed, no matter what she is, and Geralt tries to talk some sense into him, which is another thing that strikes me as peculiar. There are a few occasions in this season where it seems as though Geralt behaves like the wiser mentor and Vesemir is the hothead. Now, it is true that Vesemir in the books is not really the Master Yoda type, but he seemed calm under pressure. There were a few moments during their arguments with Triss at Kaer Morhen where Geralt or Lambert would get a little riled up, but Vesemir always seemed to keep his cool, as far as I recall. Okay, next, Yennefer wakes Dandelion up. I guess Yarpen left him here as well? She tells him Ciri is possessed, and he's mostly cracking jokes.
Please tell me you're making a hangover cure, because my head feels like it's lodged between the buttocks of a fat and sexually rageful goat.
Also, he said he dreamt of squirrels. I wonder if that's a reference to the Scoia'tael in some way? Technically, in this version of the story they don't yet exist, but they most likely will in Season 3. And speaking of the elves, let's talk about them for a moment. Franceska and Filavandrel learn that Dara was spying on behalf of Dijkstra, and instantly assume that Redania is behind their baby's assassination. Now here's the thing. Only yesterday General Grievous was hanging elves left and right just outside Franceska's window. Around the same time, she and Filavandrel basically told Nilfgaard to fuck off with their war, and that the elves will have no part in it, despite receiving immense help from the Empire. Then, the following evening, someone kills their baby, and not for a moment do they even consider that Nilfgaard might be behind it. What's even worse, nobody suspects Dara of anything, despite the fact that he was literally a spy for the people who they think have killed the baby. They don't even entertain the possibility that he might still be working with them, or that he may even be the person who killed the baby himself. So Franceska tells the young elf to gather some horses, and next thing you know, they are somewhere, I don't really know, Vesemir probably. There's a baby crying, and they say the king himself will hear it, so perhaps they are in the capital, and this woman seems to be dressed like a noble. I actually thought this might be Vesemir's baby, but anyway, the most important thing is, something's happening to the child. And we learn that Franceska is going around from door to door, casting Curse of Doom on every baby in town. And then a moment later, they all die. Now, you might say that's a good thing. Not that the babies died, but the fact that, for once, the elves are shown doing something evil. However, they're already suggesting that this is the result of manipulation, on one hand from Nilfgaard and on the other from the Deathless Mother, so we'll have to wait and see. But regardless, they now want even more human blood, and speaking of humans, Istrid shows up. They have him captured, but he tells them that Ciri is a child of the Elder Blood. Franceska gets really excited, and it seems like the elves will now go looking for Ciri as well. I have to say that a potential Ciri is an elf subplot will work much better than Yennefer is an elf, so I'm fine with that. Meanwhile, back at Cintra, Fringilla and Cahir hatch a plan to lie to Emhyr that it was them two who killed the baby in order to rile up the elves against Redania. So I'm not sure how they're going to explain the fact that Fringilla killed a bunch of Nilfgaardian officers a day earlier. Speaking of Emhyr, he finally arrives. And somehow Fringilla and Cahir already know that the elves are looking for Ciri. Has Vesemir given them the script? But never mind, because the big reveal happens. It was actually Emhyr who ordered the baby assassination.
I'm the one who ordered the death of that elven baby. I had to. It was the best path to helping me find my daughter.
And that's the big cliffhanger in the end of Season 1. Yes, this is actually the ending of the episode. I skipped ahead a bit, but I'll go back in a moment. So, what does this mean? How is killing the baby helping Emhyr find Ciri? The closest to a rational explanation I can find is that, well, Aethling's prophecy, essentially. It claims that the land will run red with the blood of the Enshe, which are these elves. And I suppose Emhyr assumed that the death of the baby will be seen by the elves as a sign of the prophecy being realized. You know, the blood of the baby symbolizing the blood of the Enshe, and since the solution from the prophecy comes in the form of a child of the Elder Blood, that means the elves will begin looking for one such child after their baby died, and in doing so they will find Ciri, which in turn will help Emhyr find Ciri, all this without the elves ever suspecting that Nilfgaard was behind it all. I mean, it's a little far-fetched, but that's the best I can come up with. Also, we could say that that was the Deathless Mother's plan as well. After all, the murder of the baby was what secured her release. So, just like CDPR implied that Gaunter O'Dim played a part in Emhyr's ultimate fate, a similar thing could be said about Vesemir, or whatever her name was. And in terms of Fringilla and Cahir, all we know about them is that they get imprisoned by Emhyr for their treachery. Now, shall we talk about Fringilla some more? I'm not sure where they're going with her character. She was kind of good at first, but then went full fanatic mode, spreading Nilfgaard's supremacy, killing her former friends while sacrificing her current allies, and then she sort of went good again, and then sort of bad again. So I don't know. Also, at this point I'm wondering, why even call this character Fringilla Vigo? In the books, she hasn't even arrived in the story yet. She's not part of any of the events of Season 1 or 2, well, other than the Battle of Sodden, I suppose, but that's not really shown in the books. And she's generally a completely different person. Originally, she's not even a Nordling to begin with, and her appearance is completely changed, so why not make her a separate character? And ultimately, this whole thing I call the Cintrian plot, you know, from the capturing of Yennefer and Fringilla, to the elves taking back Cintra, and the baby being born, all this until now, might end up being kind of inconsequential. If you think about it, most of the parties involved in it are now pretty much at the same place they were when Season 2 began.
Fancy a fuck?
Fringilla and Cahir were initially imprisoned, and now they're imprisoned again. The elves were out in the open looking for something special to help them reclaim their home. Now they're in a similar position, looking for a special girl for a similar reason. Nilfgaard was set to find Ciri, but they were distracted by the elves for the entire season, and now once again they begin their search for Ciri. Of course, the events of the Cintrian plot might have significant consequences, we'll find out in Season 3, but it just strikes me as a little suspicious because none of this was originally in the books, and it might end up simply being filler on Netflix. Okay, what else do we have? There's a small scene of the rulers of the north congregating with Tissaia. They believe Radovid wants to marry Ciri, Vesemir. Vesemir wants to marry Ciri to get a rightful claim on Cintra. So Foltest and Queen Meve decide to get rid of Ciri by putting a bounty on her head, and Tissaia suggests they do the same to anyone who aids her. This might be a setup for the eventual coup on Thanedd in the next season, where part of the mages are in league with the North and the rest are allied with Nilfgaard. Now, if memory serves me right, Tissaia didn't want to pick sides originally, and here they seem to present her as the leader of the Northern supporters, but I'm not even sure if this scene is a reference to that yet, so we'll have to wait and see. Okay, back at Kaer Morhen, the Deathless Mother is keeping Ciri locked inside her own head, and she's using her body to cause all sorts of problems. The Witchers are all drunk on potion juice, Dandelion is being Dandelion.
Shit. You're busy.
And things are about to get real. Ciri screams, which cracks the medallion tree open, and it turns out there is a monolith inside of it. Vesemir sees it and goes, "What the fuck?"
What the fuck?
She then shatters the monolith, the fragments of which open a portal, and a couple of dinosaurs come through. Lambert sees them and goes, "What the fuck?"
What the fuck kind of basilisks are those?
So the Witchers start fighting the monsters, and Geralt tells Vesemir to cast Yrden around Ciri in order to contain her. All this while she just stands there and listens, which would have probably been a good idea before she cracked the tree, or at least before she cracked the monolith. I mean, they did know what she is from a lot earlier, and also, that's not how Yrden works. And I'm not basing this entirely on the games. Vesemir's teacher actually used it in the Netflix anime when facing another demon. It was done right in front of Vesemir, and it didn't need a separate Witcher to keep it active. But now, it even looks like a completely different sign. It's basically a Quen or a heliotrope. So they contain her in it, but she doesn't seem like she wants to do anything else really, she just stands there. Then Vesemir sees that the Witchers are losing against the dinosaurs, and he decides to drop the sign and help them. So he drops it, and she still doesn't do anything. Vesemir heads off to fight, but along the way he sees a Witcher die, and he changes his mind. He turns around and decides he has to kill Ciri. So he starts trying to hit her with his sword, and Geralt is blocking his attacks without even looking at him, and they kind of ruined Vesemir in this, didn't they? He was not a terribly significant character in the books, but the games expanded on him incredibly well, I think. Then even Netflix in their own anime did a decent job with him. And despite the fact that this anime is essentially the backstory to season 2, he kind of, I don't want to say sucks, but he is weak. Not just in body, but in spirit and in character, and yeah, I don't like what they've done with him. Then, something else awkward happens. The scene ends with Geralt telling Ciri to be strong, trying to reach her true self, and she's right there next to him. Then we cut to Franceska for a moment, and when we're back, Vesemir and Geralt simply stand and watch Ciri away from her for like 20 seconds as she brings an arch-dinosaur into our world. And they don't do anything. How about they grab her and shut her mouth? Or cast Yrden again to see if it actually does anything or not. But no, they just stand there while she does it. So the beast comes in, it attacks Geralt, but the Witcher manages to defeat it. In fact, even the other Witchers are beginning to deal with the rest of the monsters. But in the meantime, Vesemir finally stabs Ciri in the gut. However, she just shrugs it off and heals herself. Now, what follows from here until the end of the episode, at least when it comes to this group of characters, is something I'm not sure how to approach. I could go over it scene by scene, trying to explain why it basically doesn't work, but I think I'll try to be a little more general about it. So, what the show is trying to do here is have a profound emotional ending, where the villain who feeds on hate is defeated through the power of love and the bonds of family, forged between these characters, and it just doesn't work. None of it is really earned. Geralt and Ciri are the only characters who have something going on between them. It's nowhere near as charming and heartfelt as it is in the books, but it is something. However, Ciri and the other Witchers, or Ciri and Yennefer, absolutely not. And they're trying so hard to show that there is something special between the two. Yennefer suddenly remembers her character arc in Season 1 and says how power is not what she really wants and decides to sacrifice herself for Ciri, which also brings back her powers. And then she says how she would never trust anyone else with Ciri but herself?
You're the only person who's helped to control her powers.
As if I'd trust anyone else with her.
I mean, only yesterday she lied in Ciri's face about Geralt so she could sacrifice the child to regain her power. And now, all of a sudden, Ciri becomes her life's dedication or something? And when Ciri casts her final spell to bring back the demon to her local sphere, she only manages to do it because she recalls Yennefer's training. Meanwhile, all Yennefer trained her was to swear? And I suppose I should mention the potentially massive repercussions of Ciri already being able to control her power to such an extent and with such precision, but I suppose they'll decide she can't do it anymore in the next season. Oh, and Geralt is making stuff up as he goes as well, although it may just be Henry Cavill imagining that Netflix adapted the books properly. But at one point, he goes to Yennefer and says, "Hey, remember how the Golden Dragon told us we are meant to be together? That we are bound by destiny, but that destiny alone is insufficient, and that something more is needed for our relationship to work?" And I'm like, what? He never said anything of the sort.
I'm going to save you both a lot of hurt with a little pain now. The sorceress will never regain her womb, though you didn't want to lose her, Geralt. You will.
Now, of course, what Geralt told Yennefer makes a lot more sense in the context of the books. In there, Geralt never really spells it out in front of her like that, but there is stuff in between the Golden Dragon story and current events, even though current events don't happen in the books, but around current events, which may lead the reader to believe that Ciri is indeed the missing link between the two. But it just comes across as so incredibly forced in the show. And I suppose I should talk about the Deathless Mother some more. So Ciri takes her, along with Geralt and Yennefer, back to where she comes from, apparently. It's a desert of sorts. I thought it might be Korath, but it is actually another world, perhaps one that suffered a kind of cataclysm. And we finally see the Red Riders, the Wild Hunt. At that point, the spirit of the Deathless Mother travels to one of the empty horses and materializes on it as one of the riders. She looks sort of undead. I'm not sure if this is her mask or her actual body. We see Yrden, presumably, their leader, and he does have a humanoid face, so perhaps these are the real riders and not just spectral projections. Also, this would mean that the Deathless Mother is an elf. This here, assuming it's her true form, is an elf. Now, is she an elf? Probably, because Geralt says she went home, implying she is native to another world. But it's strange that despite the fact that the Witchers have dealt with her in the past, nobody could tell that she's an elf. Honestly, I'm not sure if this was their original plan for the character. When information first came out about her, she was described as an old woman who roams the lands and bargains with people, turning their deepest desires against them or something like that. And this is why I used to call her female Gaunter O'Dim, because it was all incredibly similar to his description. You know, him being a traveling merchant who basically does the exact same thing, but now we see that she was stuck in a house instead of roaming the land, so did they just want to have a Baba Yaga reference? Who knows? But that's what we got, and it's not bad. She is quite powerful to be an average member of the Wild Hunt, I'd say, but perhaps she is Yrden's right hand or something, who knows? She may even be one of the Ents of Yrden, which could explain her interest in Ciri's elder blood. I guess we'll have to wait and see. And with that, I think we're done. Oh, we have a teaser for Blood Origin too, another Witcher show on Netflix, I can't really say much about it since it will take place a lot earlier than the first books, and the trailer itself shows mostly action scenes, so I'll have to learn and see a little more about it before I can share some opinion.
And we're gonna let it burn.
Okay, tell me what you think of this season's ending down in the comments, and perhaps of the season in general. I will make 1 or 2 more videos about the Netflix show before I go back to The Witcher 3, so stay tuned for that. And until then, thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my supporters and YouTube members. Stay tuned and be good.
Have you seen these boots? I mean, I pretty much just slid all the way down that hill back to Kaer Morhen.
Yaskier.
Don't fucking Yaskier me, I'm talking to you. This is how this...